Hello and welcome to the Happiness Festival. It is my absolute pleasure to be joined by Professor Sophie Scott for this live Q&A. Sophie is a professor of cognitive neuroscience and a speech communication leader at the University of College in London. Sophie, we've just watched your talk on why laughter is funny, which genuinely had me laughing out loud on more than one occasion. I especially enjoyed the inappropriate laughing newsreader. That was brilliant. So thank you so much for joining us for this live Q&A.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you very much for involving me. What a great day.
First of all, I just wanted to ask how you got into researching the science of aging, the science of laughing, sorry.
I never meant to. I never set out to do this. So I've always been interested in communication with the voice. And so I study speech, but I've also studied voices for, decades. And I've been doing a lot of work on how we express emotion in the voice. And I got very interested that everything we did was always on negative emotions. It's always fear and anger. So I started looking into this in a bit more detail, and a psychologist in the US, Paul Ekman, suggested that there might be more sort of positive emotions out there that would be worth looking at, particularly from the voice. So I thought, great, that's what I do. So I started looking at more positive emotions. And as soon as you do that, you run into laughter. And as soon as you run into laughter, you just realize it's extraordinary. It's everywhere. It's universally recognized. To be boringly technical, you can do a lot of things to sounds to take out their meaning. And it's actually very hard to do that with laughter. If there's that amplitude, that ha, ha, ha shape to the sound, people hear laughter. And it appears so early in our life, and it's found in other animals as well. So it's everywhere you look, it's sort of very interesting. And there's hardly any work on it. So we just started doing a lot more work on laughter because it was interesting and because it was there. And then you realize, of course, it's actually very nuanced, important behavior as well. So it's got this, it brings you all the way back around to communication, one of the more important communication behaviors that we do.
Oh yeah, I definitely think it's underappreciated in that sort of bracket. So I'll jump straight into the live questions from our viewers. And if anyone has any questions who's watching on any platform, please comment in the comment section and I'll read out your question. So the first one we have is from Lilana Chung. What is your most favourite and least favourite accent and why? Do you think that some accents make you funnier than others?
Well, it's certainly, if you're in the UK, we're kind of obsessed with accents. We tend to have very strong feelings about accents. And normally our reactions to accents tell you more about us than it does about the actual voices. So I grew up in the north of England. I grew up in the northwest of England, a town called Blackburn, and I'm deeply fond of Lancastrian accents. Those are the ones that I find amusing, most funny. And certainly there is quite a famous comedian in the UK, Lee Mack, who's lived in a few different places. And for a while he lived in Blackburn. And he says he does comedy in a Blackburn accent because it's the funniest accent. So that's maybe two people think that. But I think it tends to be a very personal thing, and it's to do with your experience and your affection. That's where I grew up. I'm affectionate towards that accent. So I think there's no rule about this. You won't find one accent everybody agrees is funny and everybody else, or one accent that nobody thinks is funny. So I think that's probably the way to think about it. And it's like anything with humour. It always kind of comes back to social stuff, just like laughter.
Amazing. And so for our next question from Caitlin Crosby, do you think AI will ever be able to create great comedy?
It's a good question. And in fact, there's quite a lot of people interested in this. So I was at a workshop for AI people and comedy writers just before Christmas who were asking this question. And they've run into, which is a problem you tend to run into with AI quite often, is it's very easy to teach. Not easy. It's possible to teach AI lots of stuff about human communication and human meaning. It's harder to get it to generate stuff that will always work. So you can get AI to generate lots of examples of things the AI thinks are going to be funny based on what you've shown it in the past. You still have to have a human to weed out the stuff that's funny and the stuff that's not. There's no filter. There's no kind of higher insight in the AI. And that's the kind of barrier. So it works, but you still need humans there. And I think probably to have AI that could be really good at comedy, you probably would need AI that did everything else humans can do as well, that have a culture and a social understanding and an emotional reaction and a memory and an appreciation for the niceties and appropriateness of things. All these things that feed in to humour and comedy actually feed into most of the other things we do as well.
And I always think that laughter is such a human thing, but obviously in your talk you talked about other animals that can laugh. I don't think I've ever really thought about that before.
Well, throughout history, people have thought that humans were the only animals that laugh. So Nietzsche famously thought that only humans laughed because only humans sort of suffered sadness to the degree that laughter was necessary to help them laugh at the world. And I think it makes sense if you think about it as an invitation to play, a playful behaviour, because that's actually really important to mammals. All mammals play when they're juveniles. And look, when you find laughter, it's normally associated with elements of this playful behaviour. So our laugh sounds sound very like the play grunts that apes make when they're playing and the sounds that they make when they're laughing. I think one of the problems is, because there's just so little scientific research into laughter, there's probably a great deal more laughter out there than we know about in the animal kingdom. I mean, it may not be restricted to mammals. So I read quite an interesting paper about some highly sociable parrots in New Zealand who have a distinct play vocalization. They make a specific sound when they're playing. And I think, is that laughter? Are they laughing? So we need to know, there's so much more work to do on this. If you're remotely interested in a career in research, I would say this is one of the big areas where we know nothing. And I'm certain we cannot by accident only know about the animals that do laugh. There's going to be more laughter out there.
I think that's a great area to go into, definitely. So we've got a question from Mark McCallum. He says, I loved your Royal Institute Christmas lectures, and thank you so much for the talk as well. You mentioned that many other animals can laugh. Well, we've just been talking about it. How can you tell when your dog or birds are laughing? Is there a certain noise that animals make? Well,
I think there's two things. So first of all, it's context. So if you look at the guys who did the studies with rats, what they did was they noticed the rats made a specific sound when they were playing. So they started to tickle the rats to see if that was laughter. Well, maybe they should make it when they're having a tickling interaction as well. And the rats do make that laugh when they're being tickled. Now, that could still all be the rat going, stop this, I do not like it. So they would tickle the rats and then take their hand away. And then the rat will make the sound to try and get you to tickle it again. And if you tickle, the same researcher tickles the same rat every day, they make that sound when you come into the lab. When they see you, like, oh, I'm going to get tickled. So I think there's a strong context. So if there's a sound that you notice during play and during tickling, there's a good chance of that. The other thing is, of course, rats are really small and we can't normally hear them. And these researchers were already recording the sounds rats make and reducing them down in pitch so we can hear them. So it's possible there are sounds that the animals are making that we can't hear. So if you really wanted to find out more, you could maybe try, there are apps you can buy for your phone that record the sounds that bats make, which are very high pitched. And in fact, that will work on only high pitched sounds. So you could try that to record the vocalizations of your pets to see if they are doing it. I was noticing recently quite an interesting paper about laughter in domesticated foxes. And that was very, very audible. So that was not something that was out of the range for humans. And in fact, if anything, it looked like the foxes were producing it deliberately so humans would know about it. So there may be other vocalizations, but if you Google domesticated fox laughter, you'll find the scientific papers. They're fascinating. And they tried different experiments to sort of see when you did and you didn't get these sounds. And that would be the other thing you'd need to do with your pets, is make sure, not just test for when you do find it, but also look for when situations where you think it shouldn't happen, what would happen then?
Well, I think that's something all of our viewers can do at home. If you think your pet's laughing, take a little recording, send it in. We'll judge it for you. A question from Lindsay Strauss: does our humour change over time?
I think yes. In fact, if anything, I'd say humour, it can change dramatically over time. As long as we find examples of humans making marks on the world and sort of committing things, writing down stuff down in human history, when writing appears, you immediately find examples of humour. So as soon as you get humans, I suspect you get humour. And there's a whole book of jokes, but of Roman jokes, called The Laughter Lover. Romans loved jokes and they wrote them down, and these are the jokes the Romans thought these ones are for the ages. And they're fascinating because they look like jokes. You can sort of see the shape of a joke, but they are not funny. They're not even slightly funny. And that's because everything about them in terms of their cultural meaning has changed for us. So, for example, they joke a lot about crucifixion. I mean, like to a distressing degree, and not something that we in our culture 2,000 years later really have a mood, I think, necessarily to find funny. But they did.
Humour.
And so, sorry?
Very dark humour then.
Very, very dark humour.
Yeah.
And of course, we still find dark humour. We still do that. But that specific reference isn't something that you'd find. And in fact, you get this all the time. So you get this kind of, the only thing that's true about humour and comedy is there's no one thing that over time and over place is always funny for everybody. And that's because it's actually always changing. It changes individually and it changes across cultures. And if you think back to your lifetime, do you remember about 10 years ago when everyone thought Gangnam Style was hilarious? And there was a brief period when people were like, "Oh, up now Gangnam Style," and making little videos and things. And imagine if someone's like, "I've got an idea for our Christmas video, guys, Gangnam Style," they'll be laughing. You'd be like, "Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Don't they know we don't find that funny anymore?" And that's always happening. You know, some stuff lasts longer than others, and that tends to be because it's influential. You know, it's not impossible for something to have cast a long comedy shadow. But a lot more often, you find things have a relatively fast turnover. And that's because, in fact, the culture moves on. It's like any fashion. We tire of it, we find something new.
Now, Kayun Ryan asks, what are your tips to integrate more laughter in our day-to-day activities?
And I would say, prioritize the times when you do laugh and the people with whom you laugh and the places where you'll laugh with them. So one of the first things that we did when we went into lockdown, there was me, my partner and our son, and we immediately started, like at 5:30 every day, we stopped working, we stopped doing everything, we sit down together and we watch a television program that will make us laugh. We've watched all of Brooklyn Nine-Nine twice, but it didn't really matter what it was. It was just a reason to sit down and laugh together. And we tend to think, you know, having fun with people, having a laugh, it's like trivial. It's like it's a bit of cheesecake. It doesn't matter. It's not nutritious. It's just fun. And actually, it's incredibly important. And I now personally will go to great lengths to ensure that I will manage to have time to relax and enjoy stuff with the people with whom I'll laugh, so that we can laugh together and there will be laughter, because I'll feel better, they'll feel better, and actually it's reinforcing our bonds, you know. So it's like a great amplifier, laughter. So I think whatever it takes, it doesn't matter. There's no rule to this. You might laugh more with your friends, you might laugh more with your parents. It actually doesn't matter. The thing that matters is that you're laughing. It might not be TV that makes you laugh. It might be watching YouTube. It doesn't matter. The important stuff is that you're laughing. And that's the thing I would say. Prioritize that. Pay attention to it. Take it seriously. Value it.
So you mentioned one of your favourite TV shows, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, leads well on to our next question from Casey Pierce, who asks, what are some of your favourite funny movies, TV shows or books that you recommend?
I must admit, I have an endless affection for two funny films from the 1980s, Throw Mama from the Train and Trains, Planes and Automobiles. One's a Billy Crystal sort of noir comedy, and Trains, Planes and Automobiles is a John Hughes movie about a journey home going wrong. And those still make me howl. In fact, if I don't have to be very far into a stressful episode before I will find a reason to watch one of them. Back before the lockdown started, there was a terrible storm and I got stranded in Denmark. So with my family, we couldn't get back to the UK. So we sat down and watched Trains, Planes and Automobiles when we finally found a hotel, because that was both funny and it seemed appropriate. There's so much good stuff out there. One of the things that's great about sort of social media and the growth of stuff on YouTube and podcasts is that there's always something new and funny to listen to or to read or to, watch. So I find myself a mix. I even listen to really old radio programs from the 1950s and 60s because those make me laugh a lot. And I'll also enjoy watching stuff that my son has found on YouTube that people are just making, entirely independently. it doesn't matter, I think, as long as you're laughing. Don't worry about it. There's no rule that says you should like this and you shouldn't like that, you know?
No, I think
you're allowed to like what you like.
I think there's some great recommendations, definitely there. Now, the next question is from Isabel Mills. If we're 30 times more likely to laugh with someone than on our own, how are we supposed to ever be happy, laughed while socially or physically distancing?
Well, it's a good question. And one of the things that I think you can do is try and increase the sense that you're with people. So one of the things that, I mean, it's never quite the same as being in the room with someone, but one of the benefits of face-to-face conversations on a screen, you know, all the different things you can use, Google Hangouts, Zoom, whatever, but you can see and hear somebody. The evidence is that you will laugh more than if you could just hear them or you're just texting. Now, you know what, texting, emails, you'll still laugh a bit. On the phone, you'll still laugh a bit, but you laugh more and it's like the more social information you add in, the more laughter there will be. So I think you find people have lots of different reasons to kind of create more informal reasons to hang out. And that's basically a simulacrum of a normal social situation. And it's still much better than nothing. So again, take it seriously, try it, try and find different platforms. You know, one of the things I and several friends I've noticed doing is kind of sit and watch a film virtually with someone. You're not together. You're watching the film at the same time and just texting each other as things happen, as it's going on in real time. And actually it's not quite the same as watching it with them, but it's nearly there. You're sharing that experience.
I think it's all a learning curve for everyone, isn't it? This whole physical thing.
It has been a fast learning curve.
Jack Sylvester asks, why is laughing contagious?
Laughter is contagious, probably because we learn to laugh contagiously. The contagious behaviours are really interesting. There's a psychologist called Robert Provine who sadly died last year in the US, and he did a lot of research into laughter, and he was interested in it because of its contagion. It's the only contagious behaviour. Coughing can be contagious. Yawning can be highly contagious. Blinking, extremely contagious. Scratching, that can be contagious. And one of the things that's really interesting is we learn to do. So if you look at a baby, think only when they need to moisturise their eyes. They do not laugh when someone else laughs. They do not yawn when someone else yawns. And effectively, we teach babies and toddlers and children to do this contagious behaviour because it's part of this really important social bonding. So for all contagious behaviours, including laughing, but also yawning and scratching and coughing and blinking, you find you're much more likely to do it with someone you know than someone you don't know. So you're much more likely to catch a yawn or a laugh from someone you know than someone you don't. And it seems to be a basic affiliative sign. You're showing that you have something in common with this person when you catch a yawn from them or catch a laugh from them. Now, it's not impossible to catch it from a stranger, but you're much more likely to catch it from someone you have some existing relationship with.
So it's like a sort of confirmation, like we're sort of similar in many ways. Very interesting.
Exactly. So we don't, other animals do it as well. And it's very common actually throughout nature for animals just to ping this stuff back and forth. I got, you know, you're there. I got you. And it feels like almost irritatingly simple as an explanation. But when you think about it, it's really powerful. You're just saying, yeah, I've got you. We're here. I'm with you. We're okay. And you don't need to say anything or do anything. You're just mirroring each other's behaviour back. And in fact, you often don't even notice that it's happened, but it's working.
Now, Amelia Lily Case asks, are you currently conducting research, or do you know of research that studies the impact of being happy, enjoying oneself and laughing on things like chronic disease like diabetes or health disease or dementia?
I'm not. I think there's a growing interest in this area. We're coming to realise that the way that we've ignored positive emotional experiences in psychology and neuroscience generally means we've really missed a trick, because we haven't been able to address the things that are really important factors in people's lives and maybe really important sort of ameliorative factors in people's lives. So the example of laughter is very interesting. Laughter clearly is a very powerful way for people in situations where they have a close link with someone to together deal with stressful situations. Now, we know from the work of Robert Levinson, who's looked at this. He was comparing couples. He was doing this longitudinal study of couples, looking how they dealt with stress. The couples who dealt with stress, he also identified couples. So everyone's getting stressed. Some couples did this by laughing and smiling and getting on top of the stress that way. Some couples deal with the stress by just like closing it down, passive aggressive, just don't talk about it. Some couples deal with stress with aggression. And what he found was there are health differences associated with this. So the people who dealt with the stress with positive emotion, like laughter, were healthier than the other two groups. The people, it sounds almost too textbook, but the people who were dealing with stress with passive aggression, so just closing stuff down, tended to have more musculoskeletal problems, like back problems. And the people who dealt with it with aggression had more heart problems. So it really does suggest that actually the way that you manage emotional states can have big knock-on effects on your health. Now, you don't know the direction of causality there, but the association is apparently there. And it certainly suggests, may not even be that laughter is good for you, but it is the better way of being good for you than the other stuff that's bad for you. So not being able to get on top of your emotions, not being able to deal with the stress, which laughter lets you do, is the stuff that's bad for you. And I think that's probably one of the things that's interesting about laughter, is it's always very hard to take laughter out of the social setting where you find it and say, what's actually the benefit? Is it the laughter on its own, or is it the social environment where you will laugh? Because the interesting thing about Levinson's work is the laughter only works if both members of the couple laugh. If one person doesn't laugh, then no one feels better. So it's not enough that there's laughter. You have to be able to share that. So there's the social part of it as well. So I think it makes it difficult, but then that also makes it probably where a lot of the power comes from. So I think we need to have a lot more research into this.
Very nice. And so the next question is from Anna Timonen. I'm from Finland. We are famously humorless people. How do you change cultural ideas of humour and what is considered funny? And also, how gothy are you allowed to be?
How what? Sorry. How?
I think that's meant to say how. It says gothy. Maybe I'm not sure. Gobby. Are you allowed to be? I'm not sure on that one.
Well, I think it's very interesting. There are big stereotypes about different cultures and the sort of stuff they find funny. I'm surprised about the Finnish people, because I can remember reading that Finnish people have very similar sense of humour to British people. Monty Python famously was very popular in Finland before it was popular anywhere else other than Great Britain. But I think that there are big cultural differences in how appropriate laughter is, and the places where you wouldn't do it, and where it would be rude or inappropriate or silly. Every culture has rules about this. But when you get home and you're in different situations, you tend to find everybody laughs quite a lot. So I think there's partly we have cultural stereotypes, but actually probably people do laugh more than you think. But also, there simply are very big cultural differences in what people find funny. I mean, you're going to find this unbelievable, but somebody actually did a scientific study proving that Australian people do not find French jokes funny. And French people do not find Australian jokes funny. And it's because the jokes are about different stuff. You know, because different stuff matters for you at that kind of cultural country level. There are different things that you find funny, and it's very hard to just sort of get into that. So I think it can be very hard to be too specific about other countries' humour, because actually every country will have stuff that only that country finds funny, because the way that culture and sort of cultural meaning influences what we find funny anyway.
So
all the Finnish people I know are hilarious. So.
So there's quite a lot of cultural differences in humour, and is that stemmed from the media, like the TV that they watch and all of that, or is it more sort of deep-rooted?
I think it's all sorts of stuff. I mean, I think partly it's it's very, very hard to sort of be cut and dried about it. So, but I went to a conference on humour a few years ago where someone did a whole talk about Charlie Chaplin, and he was showing all these different Charlie Chaplin routines and saying, this is the funniest thing that has ever been made. No one in the room was laughing. We were all going, yeah, that is funny. And actually, there are parts of the world you can go to, like China, where Charlie Chaplin is still considered to be extremely funny. And what you're seeing there is probably, we can appreciate that it's funny, but it doesn't make us laugh because it's been so influential. It's just familiar to us now. We're not seeing anything novel, not seeing anything new, and maybe we want to think we like new stuff, not old stuff. And whereas if you come to it fresh, maybe you're like, well, this is brilliant. I don't care about the cultural baggage. This is amazing. So it's very, very difficult to say exactly why these things can happen, or it's as much to do with kind of cultural identity and the stuff that any one culture can get caught up about. So, for example, in the UK, we get very caught up on social class. And that's a root of a lot of our humour. That's where we find a lot of stuff funny. The whole idea about punching up or punching down is coming from that. And if you have a culture where that is less important, and incredibly there are cultures that consider this to be a much less important thing, I suspect you probably wouldn't get as a sort of comedy construct to start with. And that just rolls out every possible direction. That same kind of way that it might or might not be funny, it could apply to all sorts of different aspects of life.
And we've probably got time for one final question, one from Phineas Gage. I hope he's recovered from that rod through the head. What is more important, happiness or well-being? Or would you define it between both?
I suppose it's hard to say that they could ever be truly separated, but it's certainly, I personally try, one of the few things I've learned to do with age is to do the things that make me feel better. And the things that make me feel better will generally be getting to hang out with and doing the things that make me happy. Now, that's not, the more I exercise and the better I feel, that will also tend to make me feel happier, but it's the happier is the goal. I guess that might be the thing. So I suspect that for me, it would be happiness.
Well, some wonderful advice there. And thank you so much for tuning in, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me, Sophie. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much. And great questions. Thank you very much. Thank you.
No worries. Perfect. Thank you very much, guys. Please go and enjoy all the other content on the Happiness Festival. We've got lots up there for you. So thank you and have a great day.